everybody. Thank you for coming to this awesome program. My name is Ethan, and I'm hosting this program for Aurora Public Library District. I'm very excited to introduce Stephanie Jayne, an award-winning author from the Chicagoland area who writes quirky romance fiction novels like All Last Summer and I've Got My Mind Set on Brew, the latter of which is actually available to check out at our library via Hoopla. There will be time at the end for questions, but I will be monitoring the chat and QA submissions throughout. This program will also be available to view on our YouTube channel in about 3 or 4 days after it's been edited and uploaded. So without further ado, I will go ahead and have Stephanie go over.
Hi, thanks everybody for coming. I'm Stephanie Jayne. So he mentioned my books. And so I am both traditionally published and I independently publish as Stephanie J. Scott. So I've approached social media kind of from both angles. So I can kind of speak both to indie publishing and what it's like to work with a traditional publisher. And because people tend to ask, why do I have two different names that I publish under? The book that I did it's set in a brewery that I've got my mind set on brew. The publisher asked to do a name that was not a secret pen name, but just a new name. It's all marketing type things so they can position you as a brand new author that they found and clean sales data and all of that. So I kind of have two identities, but it's really all the same stuff. So what I was going to do is I have a lot that I can cover, but it really helps to know kind of where people are at. And I know that we'll be recording this, so people will be watching this later. But for those of you who are here, if you're comfortable sharing maybe in the chat, I would love to know if any of you are using social media now already for your writer or author persona. So you can just put like yes or whatever you want in the chat. It just helps to kind of know to tailor the program a little bit. Okay, so I hope it's okay. I think the chat is published. So I see using threads with the pen name as a writer and then no, but I should. And that's a good thing to know because I feel like this is where authors get it's hard to know when to start. So if you are not yet published or you're pursuing publication, you're thinking like, do I need to start social media now or when do I start? So some of the common questions I hear are just like, what would I even post if I'm brand new? That sort of thing. So let me get this. So just kind of what we're going to cover are kind of some social media best practices and then kind of knowing your goal. And I know that can be annoying sometimes to kind of go back to it's kind of a wider zoom of like knowing why you're doing this. Because what I hear a lot from people are, well, I'm told that I should be on TikTok, that every author has to be on TikTok. And if you don't, then you're not going to sell books or you're not on this or not on that. And it can get really overwhelming. So knowing why you're doing this stuff can really help center you because I have also gotten off track a bunch of times. I'll probably skip this slide. Okay. So I consider social media one spoke in kind of the bigger wheel of book marketing. If you're talking about working with a publisher, so we're kind of all in different positions. Like I said, I indie publish and I've worked with a publisher and I've actually done them on both spectrums. My very first book was traditionally published. It was young adult and it was ebook only, but it was with a traditional publisher. And then I independently published a bunch of books and then now I'm back with a publisher. So I've kind of been all in between. But at the beginning, when I knew nothing, I didn't always even know what to ask. And now I kind of have more ideas of what to ask. But a good thing to ask when you're, if you are working with a publisher at all, is to ask them to show you an example of a marketing plan that they've done. That should be a pretty easy thing for them to say because you'll want to know what they're doing for you. And in the world of publishing, a lot goes on the author, and that's where the social media marketing comes in. For me, when I independently publish my books, I'm everything. So I send out to an editor and things like that. But I'm the publisher, so I would have to do any kind of marketing, whether that's running ads and all of those kinds of things. But when you're working with a publisher, there's a lot that you can't or don't do because they do some of it. But what they do expect is usually for the authors to be working on social media, making connections. So it kind of helps to know what they're going to do so you know what you want to do. So I always start with this, and I think it's really important. And I had mentioned to Ethan before this, I've done presentations about social media for, I don't know, since about 2017. I started mostly with Instagram, but I've kind of tailored it to kind of like bigger, all-encompassing social media. And I always have to change the slides because all the data changes because social media moves so fast and platforms change. But the thing that I've always stuck with, and I still think it's really important, is knowing why you're doing this. It's really easy to get lost and caught up, and especially when we're writing stories, all of this takes away from that, or it can. And knowing why you're doing it helps so that you have time to still do the thing that you wanted to do in the first place, which is write books, which I'm assuming you want. So knowing why you want followers. So having a goal to get to followers, but why? Why do you need the followers? Just having a number I've seen over and over really doesn't do that much. And the followers are fickle and can just like bounce at any time, you know. So it's sad if you're like looking at your, I don't know, Instagram numbers and they're up and down and you're thinking, what did I do? Did I do something? And it's really not. It's just people following and unfollowing and doing all of that. So I try not to get too caught up in the numbers, but going to your why. And this is kind of like a little homework thing you don't have to do right now, but just to keep in the back of your mind or think about later. Do I have to use social media? Will I be forced to dance on TikTok? Do I have to use every single platform? Considering like a goal for your social media, and it might be really different depending on where you're at. So if you are not yet published or even just like working on your very first book and you just want to make connections with writers, then, and that's what I did too. Back in the day, I really used Twitter a lot and I connected with writers on Twitter. And then when Instagram kind of got more popular, I started doing more like reader stuff because I was about to publish my first book in like 2016. And I wanted a space where I was connecting with like, say, bloggers or just people who liked books. So it was less of a writer space for me. Now, honestly, it's just all kind of mixed in. And I know that people are really spread out on social media with Threads and Blue Sky and like all these, you know, different places. But it does help to kind of know what you're trying to do. And there's no wrong answers, right? So you can be connecting with writers and maybe you're trying to query or pitch to agents. You might follow literary agents or follow like publishing pros. Or if you're looking for readers, you might, you know, be looking more for like bloggers and influencers. So it kind of helps to know what you want to do. This is just a little bit more about that as far as what your goal setting things are. And I think it changes too. So my goals have changed over time. I just think it's helpful to revisit those things. The biggest challenge I found for myself, and I hear it all the time from my author friends, is discoverability. Is you write this great book, and I've read great books by my friends, and then, you know, they're not bestsellers, and, you know, how do we get our name out there? So a sure path to burnout is trying to do all the things at all the time. But I do think if you pick a couple platforms and stick to those and learn them well, then you at least have a leg up. You have kind of a home base online where people know how to find you. The biggest thing too is if you're new, again, a kind of first big step that I think can be fun is to get your web domain. So to pick your, you know, someone mentioned having a pen name. If you haven't already, getting the web domain for your pen name. It's probably helpful to kind of decide on your name that you're going to be using, and then you can pick social means with it. So having consistency really helps. So it can be hard again when these platforms change, but I try to have consistent names that people can find me. It's just easier that way. Something that I think can be helpful is because you can't do everything all the time. I kind of view this as like a hang your shingle. Like if you at least say have a profile on I don't know, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. You don't necessarily have to post there, but at least if you have that and like a little bio, and we'll go over what to put in there, you can even say, hey, I hang out on Instagram, not Blue Sky, find me there. And so if the people who are big Blue Sky users, they might say, oh, okay, I was looking up this author and now I know where they are. Or, you're making connections. I just did a writer meetup thing and we're kind of exchanging information. And people are very like, I'm here, I'm there, I'm there, and there. But at least if you have a profile there, you might end up using it later. You can always have a live link. Almost all of those have a live link. You can direct people to your website or wherever you're using social media. So Facebook's really still is the big one. I think okay, so there's a 2024 stats, so they should be like at least somewhat current. But it's pretty incredible how many people are on Facebook. Love it or hate it. I do think that once you pick an author name, having a Facebook page, like the business page, is helpful to have because you'll be able to do different things with it. You might not post on there very often, but grabbing the name, making sure like you get the ownership of that name, and then you can point people there if you need to. You don't necessarily need to be posting there all the time. So this is a screenshot of Instagram. So this is a little bit Instagram heavy, but I do think that this applies to most of these sites like Threads and Blue Sky to an extent. I was like, YouTube isn't really social media. I don't go into that as much, but like a TikTok maybe. Your profile, I think, is like the biggest and easiest thing to do. So if you are just now getting your social media with your author name, your pen name, or whatever publishing name you're going to do, this can really help a lot. I mean, I've been on Instagram for a long time. I like it, but I'm pretty quick with whether I'm going to follow someone. I don't do follower games where I'm, unfollow, follow, but I'll take a look at somebody's profile and it's like 2 seconds. I can decide, is this somebody that I want to follow? It's like, do I see books there? Do I have an idea of what they're doing? So for this is one of my author friends, Melanie. And so she has this cute, like, she does all these photos with like it's kind of like pinup retro style. And so she's a romance author. So her photos and her professional photos, they make sense for her brand. And you don't necessarily have to have a professional photo, but it's something that, like, if you look at that, she's holding hearts. She's probably not a horror writer. She has her name right there. It's at Melanie Johnson. That's also ties to Threads now. She tells us in here she's author of Kissing Books, Sipper of Cocktails, Lover of Lists, Dark Coffee, Cheap Wine. And then she has her website right there. To me, that's easy to see what kind of author she is from a glance. And she also has these static highlights down there where it's events. This might look a little different because I think the screenshot's from last year, but it highlights. You could tap on that and see events that she's doing. There's like her book title is in there. So it's from a glance, you can tell what she's doing. And if you are, I have some examples on the next thing, but I do want to say for me, I don't list the actual city I live in. I just say Chicago. It's the nearest big city. I think for online safety, especially as women, don't feel like you have to share your exact pinpointed address for everyone. You can always pick like a broader area. So some examples here. So depending on the genre that you're writing, or if you're an aspiring author, you could just say, I love talking books. I'm a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan, writing your first football book, something like that, where it makes sense if someone at a glance is looking at what you're writing. So you don't even have to have a published book to just get in there that you're a writer, what genre that you're writing, what maybe you're intending to do. Are you pursuing publication? Do you publish short stories? And then I do think the geographic area is helpful to put. You can either put it in your bio. Some of the ones might have a little I don't know if they have a location tag in the profile, but people love to see geographic stuff. Like if somebody's like, I'm originally from Michigan, and so sometimes if I see an author and they write what I do and they're from Michigan, I immediately want to chat with them. And they could be from like a completely different part of the state. But it's something I think that can bring people together. And it's really good for networking. So most of these sites you probably know have one link, like Instagram does, in your profile. I use a tool called Linktree, which I just use the free version. You can also point it to your website and make a page like this that you control. But it's a link to more links. So it kind of gets around the one link on your Instagram, which, come to think of it, Instagram, actually, you can add multiple links now, but I still think people pretty heavily use these because you can list out a whole bunch of different things. So you can list out books, or if you have like a giveaway, or if you have like an event you're going to or promoting or something, then you can change those pretty easily. I think the link is really important and something that you probably know if you are already on Instagram, and some of these, all these sites kind of work different, but in Instagram, when you're posting, you can't post a link in your post because it was originally a very photo centered platform. So I see this sometimes, and I like, depending on if I know them, I might point it out in like a DM, but like there was a book event that I saw someone promoting, and they had the link, but it wasn't in the part that was clickable. So in the profile, there's a part where you can put a link that you just click on, but they had it just written out and you can't click on it. So I'm like, I have to tell them. So I sent them a DM like, hey, just wanted you to know, like, I can't click on your link. You put it in the link part where you can click on it. That's a lot easier, just to make sure that people can actually get to where you're pointing them to. So as far as what to post, I hear this a lot too, especially when you're getting started, like you just run out of ideas. So something I came up with, and this is not really original to me, I see this on social media, like gurus and influencer people talk about variations of this, but like pick a handful of things that make sense for you to post about and keep it focused. So it's easier than ever now to do multiple profiles. So in Instagram, if you have, like, I have a personal one that I pretty much ignore, but I tell friends and people who don't care about my book stuff to follow that one. I don't update it very much, but it's reachable, and all I have to do is tap a little menu thing and I get to the other one. But if you're doing kind of a more author centered or writer centered profile, pick a few things that make sense for that. So there's examples on here like books, coffee, pets. Everyone likes pets. If you write historical fiction, maybe you feature historical novels that you've been reading, like currently reading. Here's what I'm doing. And then things that kind of go with that. Coffee seems to be a big thing that draws writers together. On Threads and some of the text, like Threads, Twitter, Blue Sky is a little bit less curated. I mean, you can kind of just post anything. But I have found those sites have different personalities. I ignored Threads for a while, and I finally just joined it one day, and I'm like, oh, there's a ton of writers and authors here. And it's like drama, 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 and like the latest this and that. And I'm like, it's a kind of a lot. But I do find that throwing out an engaging thing on Threads every once in a while, like, hey, who here's writing X, the thing that you're writing, or where are all my Chicago area writer friends? I feel like that's like people want to say, oh, it's me. And they'll like find you and tag little things. And that can be kind of fun. So you're just trying not to do too much all the time on all the things. When you're trying to reach readers and writers, you're kind of doing different content. So again, I kind of feel like Threads and those things are a little bit more conversational. You're probably not going to be doing sales pitches because then you just sound like AI bots and nobody likes that. But whatever kind of content you're putting out there, readers and writers kind of talk a little bit different. And so writers, we have our own jargon, and writers might not understand any of that, which is fine if you're trying to, chat with and meet other authors. More on the reader side, they kind of talk about books a little bit differently. So kind of the whole bookstagram, book talk, there's all these different pockets of jargon, and knowing who you're trying to talk to can really help with how you communicate that. So as far as like how often to post, how do I gain followers? My kind of mantra is that the social aspect is always relevant. So if you're only scheduling posts and it's only stuff that's one-sided where you're pushing out, I don't feel like you tend to grow or kind of cultivate a relationship or friendship or whatever you're kind of seeking. So I do think it goes both ways. So spending a little bit of time looking through other people's stuff, commenting, or reposting or, whatever the platform is, engaging, I think can be really helpful to actually feel like you're going anywhere. Otherwise, you're just kind of like speaking into the void. Excuse me. And then as far as like how often to post, all of these platforms are going to have different advice. And so sometimes you get, especially if you're on TikTok, which has extremely sensitive algorithms, so you like watch one video and suddenly you see like 50 more. So I got on the thing for a while where I think I watched some kind of, how to get more TikTok followers, which of course everyone on TikTok is going to watch a movie or like a video about how to get more followers. And like the advice on there is easy. It changes all the time. And I'd see like a video that would say to do one thing, and the next video would say the total opposite. Like the hashtag stuff's all different. Just like, I don't know. So if you're picking a couple platforms a few times a week, trying to be consistent, if you're going really hard on TikTok, the advice is like 3 videos a day and doing all these extra things, which again, really depends on if you want to do. I personally ended up having a lot of fun on TikTok a couple years ago, but I got burnt out. Like I enjoyed it, but the kinds of videos that I like thought were fun, I didn't really get a lot of engagement. And then the ones that did took more work. Um, that's like a whole separate thing. But I did try it and I did like it. And I think there is a cool community of readers there, but I just can't personally keep up with it. So I don't really invest a lot of time there. I personally invest more of my time on Instagram because I've made more relationships with some readers there. So it really kind of depends on where you want to go with that. You don't have to read all this. I just think it's an example. This is one of my author friends who she wrote about a real life thing where she got temporary amnesia. It was actually very scary, but her memories recovered. And so she had started posting these little snippets about her experience with it. So she has this cute picture with a dog, but then she's really telling a story in her Instagram caption. And as writers, I feel like that's our I don't know what the word is. I was gonna say bread and butter. I don't know. It's a perk, right? So we don't have to say, here's me with my dog. It's like, here's this experience I had. And so many people were like chiming in about, oh, I know somebody who that happened to, and what an incredible experience. And like you kind of build a different relationship with people sharing something personal as long as you're comfortable with it. I do think being a real person helps because when you just see stuff, especially now, gosh, like when I started doing these presentations, AI was not even like really part of the picture, but now it's AI everything all the time. And it's like, oh, automate this and have AI write all your posts for you. And I'm like, you can, but it's probably going to sound really impersonal. So I'm not a fan of that. I don't feel like that helps for social media if you're actually trying to be social. That's a choice, right? But I do think being a real human matters and saying genuine things and engaging genuinely, I think matters. And I think that's what helps with not feeling burnt out by things because if everything's constantly curated content pushed out all the time, I don't know that that's necessarily gaining new readers or relationships. As far as like building up followers and strategies for what to post and those things, I think it's really helpful to know your niche. So I'm a romance writer, and if you get a room full of romance writers or even readers, you can get people reading and writing all different things that barely even overlap. So just saying like romance, like, well, what kind? Well, mine is sweet and it's romantic comedy, and I also have young adult, but I'm not dark mafia. I'm not, historical. I'm not some of these other things. So then you start to narrow down a little bit. And so when I start stuff, I look for people I know, like people, authors that are publishing the same things that I am, that I might want to make sure that I'm following some of those people just to be in their circle or see what they're doing or see what their readers are saying when they comment on things. Um, and then I think some other tips on here are just about using alt text. You can probably read that about just describing your photos. I think some of the newer platforms are really good about Blue Sky and Threads will prompt you to put alt text, which I think is really important for um, visual threads. Sorry, got a little lost there. Okay, as far as locations too, I think this can be helpful, and depending on what platform you're using, I usually would post after the fact, but like say I'm going to do an event this weekend, which I have been promoting, but I'll post pictures and I'm going to tag the city that it's in and I'm tag the venue, because then people looking later, they might say, oh, I didn't know there were book events there, or I didn't know there was a writers group here that maybe you're part of. I do think, I know it sounds like a necessary evil, but I do think that, and they tell us themselves, that video is really where you reach new people. The reels on both Facebook and Instagram, the algorithm is a little bit different than your static posts, and they're supposed to reach people beyond your usual audience. There's a lot more you can do now about cross posting. So if you do end up cross post or posting on TikTok, there's ways to save the video without the TikTok little watermark and put it on Reels. I don't know how active they are anymore, but in the past, there were several really big Facebook groups about TikTok for authors. So if you are on Facebook searching groups and you put in the word author and TikTok, there's several groups coming up, and they tell you all the little ins and outs about getting started. You don't have to do video, and it really just depends, but you can reach different people that way. So again, it kind of goes back to your goals. This just kind of describes Reels. I don't know if we really need to go over that, but I can answer some questions about it. I think it's really important, depending on who you're trying to reach, to not directly message people asking them to do something for you, especially when you don't know them. And I know this probably sounds very obvious, but I have gotten DMs that I think are ridiculous. And some of them are just straight up spam that if you start posting writer content, especially on Instagram, you will probably start getting DMs from people wanting to have you sell stuff, or I don't know what they are. They want to have you be a jewelry ambassador. I'm like, I don't post anything about jewelry. Or they'll say, oh, I'd love to review your book. I really like your books, but it's always vague. It's never like, they never say a title. I'd love to review them. Well, they want you to pay them money. So just be wary of the things that coming into you, that people, first of all, like want your money all the time as a writer for courses and all these things, but also to just be delicate with how we're approaching people if you're asking them for things. And then I gotta have a plug to newsletters. If you, depending on where you are in your publishing process, so if you haven't published anything yet, maybe it's too soon for a newsletter, but a email list or a marketing list like MailChimp or MailerLite are kind of the big that you can use. Those are things you can control a little more. And especially in the past few years, with what we've seen with Twitter, all these people leaving that platform for other ones, being fragmented everywhere. When you have an email list, it at least is like a small little group of people that you can directly share information with. There's lots of resources on newsletters, and I think I have a handout that I think I did not share with the library here, but I can get that for you. When I mentioned Newsletter Ninja is a book, it's an ebook, and then there's also a Facebook group that has a lot of best practices for newsletters. And I'm going kind of fast here because I was trying to get through everything here and then really have time for questions, because I think that's most helpful. But the main things that I think are important, again, are having a goal. So knowing why you're doing this, if you're trying to reach readers or if you're trying to reach authors, or if it's a mix of both. and kind of crafting your content around that. Or say, like, if Instagram is where you want to connect with readers who read what you do, and then, Threads and these other more text-based ones, more for interacting with writers, that can work. At some point, all authors, once we're hoping that if you're moving toward publication, once you get to that point, you're going to say, well, I have all these author and writer friends, but how do I find the readers? So I think it can be helpful to kind of build those at the same time. And also knowing your niche and your subgenre, because just being in a group of books people, I mean, that could be anything. So horror readers are probably not my readers. Sci-fi people, there are people who always cross over into things, but I'm looking for kind of an ideal reader who reads romantic comedy or lighter romance that really is more of an escape, I guess. So I kind of have the people that I look for, the cute, colorful covers are kind of my deal. So when I see an Instagram account and it's like colorful covers, I feel like, ooh, I'm kind of circling around the right place. So thinking for yourself who your ideal reader is, you might not know the answer yet, but thinking through that, like, what would the person that you think would enjoy what you write, what are their interests, and which books are they reading? And can you kind of shape content around it? One of the things I think that can be frustrating with TikTok and their algorithm, which I had mentioned is like very sensitive, is you kind of see the same content over and over because it wants, if you like something and it wants to show you more of the same thing. But what can happen there, and I've heard a lot of readers and writers complain about this, is the same books get profiled all the time. You have to be really, really deliberate to be like, no, I want to see different books, or I want to see books that aren't the same 4 or 5 authors that are out there all the time. Um, so that can help, knowing who the big authors are in your area or in your, genre, that can help get you started, but also knowing kind of the smaller tiers of authors, because you can say, hey, look what I'm reading, and it's the most popular book and everybody's talking about it. I think that can be helpful to get started, but I personally, I don't always read the most popular books. I read the ones that I want. I will share the books that I think I want people to know about more. So I'll repost other people's content, or I'll share what I'm reading, things like that. It's a good conversation starter. I didn't go into this a whole lot, but asking a question is helpful because people like to talk about themselves, right? So you can talk about yourself, but usually what helps is, I'm reading this and I really liked it, but what do you read? What are you reading this week? Adding some kind of question, they call it like the call to action in the old like blogging days or article days. But I think that can be really helpful too, to um, elicit engagement from other people. And then just having a profile that really shows who you are as an author. The bio, I think, is really important. And then honestly, it's okay if you decide you don't want to do any of this. If you decide you want to hide from social media, you can finish your book and write the next book and maybe regroup and come back to social media. But I really, really think it's important to know why you're doing this. Otherwise, those books don't get finished. And that's like the main thing. So finish your books and um, pick the social media that you like. So that's where I'm going to wrap up that. But I have lots of notes and lots of stuff that I can give feedback on, or suggestions, or just my opinion if anyone has questions.
All right. Yes. So if you want to click on the raise hand feature, you can ask a question like that, and I will allow you to like unmute yourself. Or if you want to type in questions in the chat, we can also do it that way, or the Q&A, whatever you guys are comfortable with. All right. It looks like I got a raise hand. Give me 1 second. All right. So I'm going to put this in the main chat because it looks like you sent that just to me. Um, I'll put that in the main chat here. Somebody asked, do you find it's important to have an author website or is a link tree typically sufficient?
I think eventually an author website is helpful because the link tree is really just a list of links that point other places. Um, Having a website that you control is, I think, important, especially again with the way social media goes. I had heard through the grapevine that there was a whole bunch of Facebook groups that accidentally got deleted. I mean, by Facebook, like I don't know what they're doing over there, but some of these really big groups with like thousands of people, they just disappeared one day. And, a lot of people use those for organizing. I mean, even outside of the book world. And so if you're only depending on, having a Facebook page, like who knows if something goes down with that? I guess that can happen with a website too. So it might not be the first thing that you do, but I think that um, is important eventually to have a website. And I think there are some fairly inexpensive options to do that. They don't have to be um, super elaborate. Yeah. So for Brandy, like what do you know, like what post on like what platform? Is that like a certain, oh, Instagram. Oh, like a very first post. I mean, you could always do like an intro post. Um, you could always do, if you're comfortable, I have like a little picture. I think my picture of myself in front of a bookcase. It could just be even a book stack, but an intro post I think can be helpful. And sometimes even just like to get started on Instagram to have like 2 or 3 posts where you don't feel like there's just one hanging out there, but you can post 3 kind of quickly. And then it looks like you have, maybe there's not as much stress on like one post. I don't know. I feel like Instagram is pretty casual. I mean, the book community I feel like is pretty friendly on Instagram. I mean, of course, there's always drama and little pockets and things, but I think people, if you're like, hey, I'm new to Instagram and I'm looking for friends who read XYZ, people like that stuff. Oh,
And
and
then oh, sorry. There's another question. Can you share your experience in deciding how to build your author website?
yeah, so the very first website I did was probably back in like 2015 or something. And I had a WordPress site, but it was there's like a free WordPress site where it's like the WordPress, I don't remember. There's like 2 different ones where there's one that you can kind of do yourself, and then there's ones that you kind of need to have somebody know what they're doing. So I had someone design it and all that, but I didn't really know the back end stuff. And it was, I thought, kind of cumbersome to update. There's some, I think, like Squarespace and maybe even Wix, and some of these ones have like more drag and drop stuff that's a lot easier. I weirdly now use MailerLite for my website, which I don't know anybody else who does. I mean, maybe I met like 2 other people. So MailerLite is for newsletters. It's like a very big newsletter platform, but they also have on there, you can build a website. And I was like, okay, so it's basic, but it has all the building blocks of stuff, and I can do it all myself. So I've kind of done both. I've done the thing where I've invested in a whole website designer, and they did the whole thing, but I just didn't like that I couldn't update it myself as much as I wanted to. So I went to something easier. So I think there are some pretty easy platforms there.
And then there's another question. Looks like they said, sorry if you already answered this, but what's the best way to organically reach your audience? Are Reels/TikToks better in terms of engagement?
Yeah, so I think it's called like the creator account on Instagram. Like there's a Instagram that you can follow that's the creators of Instagram, like that um, they tell you things that I think, I mean, I'm in all these groups like trying to learn stuff, and it's like, oh, they'll just tell you, and they just straight out say reels, they show them to people who aren't already your followers. So if you're trying to grow your reach beyond the same few people that seem to always be commenting, it really is the video stuff. Like pretty much anytime Instagram or any of these platforms introduce something new, they will reward people for using it. So, and you know, if you've been on them, that they change them all the time. Like TikTok had a thing for a while where I think it was like a story, like they all copy each other, right? Like the story went away. So it was like just there for 24 hours or something. But then they would take it away. But I would always try everything. Like any new thing that they're pushing, I would just try it because um, they want people to try it and then they push your content out more. Like they had notes, they had something on Instagram, they got rid of it. But it was something that you could tag. And I got like a whole bunch of like comments on something before because I used their thing. And then they ended up getting rid of it like a year later. But I do think it's helpful to look out for what they're pushing, what features they have. Sometimes when you log in, it will be like, oh, did you see this? And it will pop up. So I, even if it's annoying, I'll always click on it and be like, ask them to show me the details of it because I want to know what it is. And then I'll like eventually try it. So it doesn't mean you necessarily have to do TikTok, but I do think if you're on Instagram, doing some kind of video stuff does reach different people and helps to kind of get your content out there. I was going to offer this because I have been asked this question in these presentations a couple times, but people had asked, can you use a personal social media account for your book stuff? And it's kind of just up to you. So people who have kids sometimes don't want their, you know, you've got pictures of your kids at like their elementary school. You might not want that connected to your author brand and blasted out to everybody who now knows where your kid goes to school. You know, so like privacy things, but it's nothing like wrong with it. I do feel like having separate writing and personal can be helpful because you're more focused. So like again on Instagram for me, I'm probably not going to just follow somebody that just has a bunch of random pictures of like pickup trucks and all this other stuff because they're truckers. Like that's just not my thing. But then they might be like, I like books too, but none of their posts have any books in it. Like I'm just not going to probably engage with that very often. But if I look at somebody's account and it's like, here's what I'm reading today, and here's my friend and I went to this bookstore, like that to me is what I'm looking for because I'm trying to just do book stuff there. So just keeping in mind if you're a writer and you're trying to make connections and people look at your profile and all they see is other stuff that's not writing or not books, then that can be harder to connect with people. Okay, so there's a question about Substack. Is Substack the new it place for newsletters? How do people? So that's interesting. So I'm not a newsletter expert by any means, but I am in a couple groups on Facebook about newsletters. And I think there are authors using it, but it is very limited. So it's not, Substack is not a newsletter platform per se. It's more of like, you know, people are writing like essays and then you can send it out to people. But it depends on what you want to do with it. So it's not going to have a lot of features. So like in a MailerLite, you can segment people. This starts getting in the weeds a little bit, but you can have people who like barely open your stuff and people who are like opening everything and clicking on everything that you do. And like those people, I send more emails because they care about what I'm sending them. You can't do a lot of that with Substack. And then there's things about like deliverability rates with like Apple and Google change stuff all the time. So I don't know how Substack is with that. So some of these newsletter platforms are more attuned to like, you know, like a brand like the Gap or something. Like they use some kind of newsletter platform. Like we're obviously smaller than that, but they're equipped to send out lots and lots of emails and segment and do all these like cool different things where Substack is really pretty basic. But if it's free and you don't need fancy, it might be an option. So I have seen more authors using it. I just think it's not quite the same as a newsletter. Um, And then this next question, how do you get over the anxiety of putting yourself out there? Are you nervous of people finding your non-writer pen name accounts? I mean, that can be a real concern, like if you don't want people to find that. So I've been pretty careful about, I don't put my actual, I mentioned this earlier, the exact city I live in. I just say Chicago or Chicagoland. if someone really wanted to dig deep, they could probably find it, but I don't make it easy, right? Like I just keep it more general. And then I also don't I have a day job. I don't put anything out of the specific place that I work. Again, if someone really wanted to find it, they could probably dig and find it, but that's not something I offer. And I want that separation. I don't want those things. So you just have to be deliberate about it, I think. And then um, I don't know, it's really hard in this landscape of, our digital footprints are kind of everywhere. So I think if you put concerted efforts there, you can keep those things separate, but there could be a chance people could find out, like I think that's always like a risk. I am not personally nervous about that, but also I understand that some people have a reason for a pen name that like is not my reason. So kind of depends on other questions are there. I know I had a list of some other questions that people ask a lot. Something that came up in one of the other presentations I did, I just think this is really helpful. So if you ever are pitching a book, so if you are pitching an agent, if you're doing a query letter, anything like that, it is such a helpful skill to have. So even if you don't go the traditional route with an agent, you still need to come up with a concise like pitch or blurb for your book. And that's you'll use that over and over. It's just a skill that is always super helpful. So if you're in a query phase and you're doing all of that, you will use that so much because eventually, like the query that I did for the one book that was published, like some of that word for word is what's on printed on the back cover of the copy. That was like from the original query letter to an agent, and then it eventually got on the book later. And then also just knowing how to concisely tell someone what your story is about is super important. And you use it in social media all the time because you're probably not going to copy and paste a blurb all the time in every social media post, but you could say, I wrote a craft beer romance in a fictional Chicago microbrewery, and that's my book. So sometimes I say that, or sometimes I say it's a workplace romance set in a craft brewery in Chicago. Little things like that that people are like, oh, okay. And either they're like, yeah, that's not my thing. I don't like beer. Or they're like, that's amazing. I want to buy your book. And I've literally had people, I leave them one sentence, and if they're into it, they're into it. Oh, because there's a comment, some people are still carrying business cards. I mean, I do have some business cards. I don't use them very often, but sometimes people still want them. Um, but I was at a thing where they held up a QR code and there's like, here's my card. So I'm like, what do I do? You do that anyways. It took me to a website and then I screenshot the website because I thought, well, I'm going to shut all these windows down and then I don't have it anymore. But yeah, so I don't know if people need to get a business card, but um, interesting how fast things are changing. Does anybody have any questions about like publishing in general that I could help answer? Or anything about where you're at and where you're trying to get to, just since we have a little bit of time. Oh, the question is, what are you seeing in romance trends for submissions to publishers? I mean, last I knew the rom-coms were still going super strong because I do have a literary agent and she is way more on top of that world than I am, and she shares that information. For a while, yeah, it was been rom-com for a while, and then the romantasy obviously got very big from Fourth Wing. Um, I don't think that that's really changed. I feel like those things probably will change. It feels like those trends need to, like, it feels like they've been going for a while. So I'm surprised that seems to still be what people are looking for. Um, I have noticed, but I don't know that this is from the publisher side, but I have noticed that there's romance authors dipping into mystery, whether it's cozy or paranormal-ish, but with like a mystery bent. And then the cowboy stuff seems to be coming in, but it's more like, I don't know, branded differently. Like there's always like, if you think about old romances with like the paperbacks, like the mass market paperbacks, like the whole romance industry has moved away from those to a more like trade paperback style. So even the art is looking different. Um, so Danica, and I'm losing her last name, but she's a Native American author, and she had a rom-com last year, and she has a cowboy Native American book coming out. And that's her and like Lila Sage. I feel like they're doing like a promo together. And like that's kind of, I feel like that's coming out a lot where it's these kind of like newer retro covers with cowboys and romance. To me, it seems like that's a trend. There's another question. How do you feel about cross promoting with the other authors in your series? Oh, yay. Hi. I was like, you actually know about my book. No, I didn't. I specifically sought out a multi-author series opportunity. So that's with my independently published books. I just like doing group stuff. So I had done a couple group projects before and had been wanting to do something, and it's sometimes just finding the right one. So this was just a weird, it finally worked out. I felt like all like a year ago, I couldn't find anything, like people were looking for things and it just was not something I was interested, or I was too late, or I missed out. So I have really liked it because, first of all, in this case, someone else organized all of it. They came up with all these deadlines, which to me I thought was helpful. Like, I give me some deadlines and some structure, and I will follow all those directions. What I think can be really overwhelming about a lot of this, especially if you're just starting out, is like, well, I can do anything. Like, when do I turn it in? If there's no one asking you to turn it in, you could just keep writing the same book for a long time. And that does happen with your first books, right? They take a lot longer than, you're learning and everything. But I find that deadlines are very helpful for me. And then the cross promoting has been very helpful because there's 7 authors, so we're basically writing standalone books, but they all have the same cover designer, so the covers look cohesive. All the font and everything is cohesive, so it's a series, but they're each our own individual books. But we had a group of us that made graphics behind the scenes where we use Canva, which is, for those of you who don't know, like a tool where it's kind of like Photoshop for anybody. Like, you don't have to have Photoshop skills to use Canva. It's very easy to learn and use. So there's some of us that did a bunch of graphics, and there's other people that put together copy stuff for blog or newsletters and things, so it's like you're spreading out the work. So that's really nice too. So it's kind of just having that support. It's probably, many of you know, this can be really it's kind of solitary, writing by yourself. If you have a group or, writers groups, organizations, or just friends, even on social media, that's another good perk of social media, is you can network with other authors. But it is really nice to have other people to work with. Maybe I'll open this up a little bit to, what are you all writing? I'd love to hear, just throw it in the chat what you're working on, or like what type of book. And if any of you are local in this area to Aurora Public Library, I did just find out they have a writers group. It's only been around for about the past year. I did not know that.
I
After,
can,
oh yeah,
oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I'll go ahead and throw a link in the chat to
oh yeah.
the event page for the writing group.
Yeah, I have a couple book releases. So I did a short story for an anthology that supported the libraries that were damaged by wildfire at the beginning of the year in Los Angeles, which feels like a million years ago. But it was a charity anthology. I did a short story for that, and short stories are not things that I do regularly, so that was also a fun challenge for me. And again, it had a deadline, so I was like, I can do this. I can write within a real, short word space, time frame window. And then I have a book coming out with that series with the 7 authors, so that's on July 22nd. It's called Beauty and the Grease. It's a novella rom-com in a series. And then I have one of my own books that I'm putting out in August, and those deadlines got a lot closer than I wanted them to. But it's a romantic comedy that's part of a 3-book series I've been writing. But those are technically all done. They just need to get released. And the next one is something I'm going to be working on for my agent that we will then pitch to publishers. And it is bridesmaid theme related. I'll just say that. And I started writing it, but I need to kind of start over, which sometimes that happens, but I have a better idea of what the story is now. Sasha, so nice to see you. Finishing up your middle grade. That's awesome. And a cozy mystery series. That's awesome. Contemporary psychological. Oh, yeah, that can be tough. So, contemporary psychological drama. I feel like those are really popular. I have a lot of work friends at my day job who read, and they're all reading like women centered thrillers. So I think that's probably a hot genre. Dark fantasy, awesome. Oh, holiday rom-coms, yay. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I know it's kind of challenging doing a program on social media because we're all coming from different places and people use it differently. But I don't know, I think just having a little bit of consistency and kind of showing up can really, I don't know, you can really build a lot of friends that way. And just to kind of wrap this up, I'll share that recently I met with an author that I've known online since 2012, probably. Only knew each other online, I guess, from just blogging circles. And like, I don't know, there used to be these contests on blogs where you would pitch an agent on a contest. I don't even know how to describe it anymore, but it'd be like, I don't know, like a pitch event on a blog, I guess. And like we met through some group like that, but she physically moved near me and she had always lived in another state. So we had never met in person. And now we've hung out a bunch. And it's just like, I've known you for all these years, but we met basically because of social media. So it's just kind of a fun story. Well, thanks for everybody for coming. If that's about it, looks like we're right about at time. This was fun. Thank you for showing up and asking good questions.